Thank you. Welcome to the Canby City Council regular meeting for March 20th, 2019. If you'll please stand for the invocation and the pledge. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for everyone that has gathered here this evening. I thank you so much for this great start to our spring, this great community that we have. I thank you for the leaders here in the dais, those here in the room. Please grant us wisdom and discernment this evening as we do the city's work. Before I close, I just want to take a moment to reflect on the devastating event that took place last Friday on March 15th in Christchurch, New Zealand. As you are all too well aware, a gunman opened fire at two mosques, killing over 50 people. Even more alarming was the fact that the event was broadcast live on social media for a brief moment of time before being shut down. If you please just take a moment of silence, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. I bring this up this evening to pay respect to those victims and their families of this tragedy, but I also bring it up because it made me reflect on our community. As I live day to day in our beautiful city, I'm always humbled and impressed by the number of places of worship and other community gathering spaces we have in our city. However you choose or not to choose to worship, you have communities here to welcome you. And you should be able to enter and worship and gather in these places without fear of attack or persecution. Everyone should also feel safe and welcome in our city and in our council meetings. We welcome you regardless of race, creed, religion, color, sexual orientation, political affiliation, or beliefs. We welcome you. In fact, this is of such importance to the city and city council that we ratified a resolution on this on July 12th, 2016. I thank you all for being here and being in our community. So, God bless you all, and let's do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Keep all my notes straight this evening. I do have a proclamation this evening regarding Vietnam Veterans Day. Whereas on January 12, 1962, United States Army pilots lifted more than 1,000 South Vietnamese service members over jungle and underbrush to capture a National Liberation Force stronghold near Saigon. Operation Chopper marked America's first combat mission against the Viet Cong and the beginning of one of our longest and most challenging wars. Through more than a decade of conflict that tested the fabric of our nation, the service of our men and women in uniform stood true. 54 years after that fateful mission, we honor the more than 3 million Americans who served. We pay tribute to those who have laid to rest, and we reaffirm our dedication to showing a generation of veterans the respect and support of a grateful nation. And whereas the Vietnam War is a story of service members of different backgrounds, colors, and creeds who came together to complete a daunting mission, it is a story of Americans from every corner of our nation who left the warmth of family to serve the country they loved. It is a story of patriots who braved the line of fire, who cast themselves into harm's way to save a friend, who fought hour after hour, day after day, to preserve the liberties we hold dear. From Ai Drang to Hue, they won every major battle of the war and upheld the highest traditions of our armed forces. And whereas 11 years of combat left their imprint on a generation, thousands returned home bearing shrapnel and scars. Still more were burdened by the invisible wounds of post-traumatic stress, of Agent Orange, of memories that would never fade. More than 58,000 laid their lives in service of our nation. Now, forever, their names are etched into the faces of black granite, a lasting memorial to those who bore conflict's greatest cost. And whereas our veterans answered our country's call and served with honor, and on March 29, 1973, the last of our troops left Vietnam. Yet in one of the war's most profound tragedies, many of these men and women came home to be shunned or neglected, to face treatment unbefitting their courage and a welcome unworthy of their example. We must never let this happen again. Today, we reaffirm one of our most fundamental obligations to show all who have worn the uniform of the United States the respect and dignity they deserve, and to honor their sacrifice for serving them as well as they served us. Over half a century after those helicopters swept off the ground and into the annals of history, we pay tribute to the fallen, the missing, the wounded, the millions who served, and the millions more who awaited their return. Our nation stands stronger for their service, and on Vietnam Veterans Day, we honor their proud legacy with our deepest gratitude. Now, therefore, I, Brian Hodson, by virtue of the authority vested in me as Mayor of the City of Canby, do hereby proclaim March 29th, 2019 as Vietnam Veterans Day, and I call upon all Americans to observe this day with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities that commemorate the anniversary of the Vietnam War. Given under my hand this 20th day of March 2019. If we have anyone here from VFW to take that at all? No? We will make sure that that gets where it needs to go. Thanks, Kim. Item D, that's not on your agenda. I have been asked for a special elected officer dispensation, so Mayor Holliday has some things to address us on so that he can get to his city council meeting. Mayor Holliday, how are you? Or your commission meeting, pardon me.
A legitimate excuse. Mayor Hodson, City Council, City Administrator Robinson, thanks for having me tonight. I appreciate the dispensation. I rise tonight to speak on the parking issue that is coming before you later this evening. My partner, Betty Mum, is the owner of Ultimate Team Spirit. I do a little bit of work there once in a while. And I come to say that with a city that's had a parking problem since 1850, I think I know a little bit about parking issues. And I think where you guys are at, you're in a problem or a solution looking for a problem. I don't believe there's a parking problem in downtown Canby. We've been here for 4.5, close to 5 years. We've never had an issue. We recently moved onto First Avenue between, or next to the bike shop, whatever the case may be. The point is that we've never had a parking issue. I believe this alleged parking issue extends from either miscommunication or confusion or just lack of paying attention to the Dahlia project and the parking issues that could have surrounded the Dahlia project. It's astounding to me that when I was watching the project be built, because we actually had a business that was dislocated by the project, I kept hearing that there was plenty of on-site parking, and for the on-site parking that wasn't available, there was plenty of off-site parking, whether it was street parking or the parking along First Avenue. The problem comes when somebody, however contractually or whatever, allowed the Dahlia project to charge for parking on their own property. It's a rather illogical choice to grant them special dispensation about parking and then allow them to charge $50 a month for uncovered parking and $100 a month for covered parking. Because the fact is that most of the residents are paying a pretty high premium for the apartments they're living in now. And why would they spend $100 or $50 a month when they can literally drive across the street or park on the street and they don't have any issues with parking? If you go anywhere other than the blocks surrounding the Dahlia building, there is never a parking issue. We don't have any parking issues on First Avenue. There's never been a parking issue on Second Avenue. Even when Gwynn's came in and became really successful, and we were still in the old City Hall building, we never had any issues with not having at least a couple of parking spaces open in front of our business. So I would encourage you to seriously consider the consequences of making this action tonight and maybe thinking about going back and looking at maybe there's another reasonable solution that can be crafted between the three businesses that are being impacted by the building. I also, having experienced having a parking person for more than 30 years, Canby's going to go back to the oldest style of parking enforcement, which is a guy walking around either with some kind of a handheld device or a chalk stick, and just walking around all day doing that. Well, that's a pretty expensive proposition for the amount of revenue that you're going to get from the parking tickets that you're talking about. So I'm not sure that that's a revenue neutral way to go about this. I think there's better ways, and I am convinced that you all are smart enough to figure that out. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Holliday. Appreciate it. Have a good meeting.
If I may, I do need to provide one point of clarification. There is no off-site parking requirement in our downtown core. So the fact that the Dahlia has provided parking at a cost to the residents staying in the apartments is, it's unfortunate, but it's not directly relevant, because they could have built a building and had zero off-site parking, which would have had no benefit whatsoever, and still been in compliance with the City of Canby's downtown business overlay district.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. I'm sure we'll have more here in a little bit. Moving into communications, anything right now, Ms. Robinson? Okay. First opportunity for citizen input this evening. This is an opportunity for audience members to address the council on items not on the agenda. Each person will be given 3 minutes to speak. Please speak directly to the microphone. We have a fancy clock here in the front that tells you how much time you have left, and if you can't see that, there's little lights in front of you that tell you green, you can keep talking, yellow, wrap it up, and red is you're done. Please fill out a yellow card to make sure that our city recorder gets it so that I can then get it. And then please make sure that your comments are directed to me, the mayor. If you have something on the agenda or an item in the agenda, I will bring your card up when we get to that item. Right now, former Councilor Tyler Smith. Good evening, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. Thank you, City Councilors. I come today to, as I put on my card, explain a little bit about why I didn't run for council. I was asked by a number of people that night and since then, and wanted to get a few things out there into the public. And out of respect for Councilor Varwig, I didn't want to do it on my last night here because of the celebration for him and the congratulations of his election, and I wish him great success. But I did want to address some of the things that I think were problems or bothered me and instigated me and motivated me to not run for office again. And the keys that I think you all, or not all of you, I state this with not all of you, but some of you should take heed of and think about is some of the childish behavior and the waste of time and city money and embarrassing things that take place at our city council meetings and in some of the conversations about each other and about other city councilors. For instance, many of you may not, got 2 minutes, many of you may not know, during the appointment process, which as was contentious, I was labeled as too conservative and overly political and those kinds of things. And some of the city councilors, or at least one, paid for a background check on me for an appointment process. I got a call from one of my attorney friends during the appointment process that said he was contacted to be hired to do a background check. Other comments. I don't want to sit next to her at city council meetings, rolling eyes every time he or she talks, soapbox speeches, remonstrances, and grandstanding about things that are not agenda items. I was the one that was chastised and labeled as too political when I was seeking appointment and didn't even want to run for this position. Some people want this position and they should act in a professional manner. Those are the reasons I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. Another thing that's come up is I had mentioned to the mayor that I thought we spend too much time and take away from important, very important things like Vietnam Veterans Memorials Days by having too many insignificant proclamations. I went back and counted 2017. That was the first year I was on city council. We had 23 proclamations in 12 months. Some of them are important, some of them are not. Barbershop Singing Week, I would posit to you, takes away the significance of Vietnam Veterans Memorial Day or Iwo Jima Day, both which days we had. in different months. We had March for Meals Month. We had an important one, Vietnam Veterans Day. We had Window Safety Month, Water Safety Month, National Library Week, Grange Month, Poppy Days, and specifically Canby Poppy Days, the NLAC Food Drive. My time is up, but the list goes on and on, 23 of them in just 12 months in 2017. I think we should spend our staff's time on more important matters and eliminate some of the less important matters that have historically taken place, such as reading the library agenda, reading the list of events that's going to be taking place at the library or that people did over the weekend or their social events are not necessarily things the public or staff needs to spend their time or their money hearing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Tyler. The rest of the cards I have, I believe, are for later in the meeting, so we'll move into mayor's business for this week, this meeting. Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, otherwise C4, we had Metro President Lynn Peterson speak to the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee about the T2020 bond. That is a Metro bond that they're looking to move forward on. It's a large transportation bond package that they're looking at doing. Right now, the range that they're looking at is $2 billion to $20 billion. So I think there's a large gap there in terms of what they are looking at. So the big piece that they're looking at is looking at corridor improvements in the metro area. The only reason I bring it up, I mean, Canby is not in the metro boundary, but I bring it up because in Clackamas they're looking at areas for improvements with this bond, like Highway 43, McLaughlin Boulevard, McLaughlin Boulevard, and then finishing off the Sunrise Corridor in the Happy Valley area. So there'll be much more to come on that. The Clackamas County Board of Commissioners did vote and pass the vehicle registration fee, and that will be going into effect, I think, in the next couple of months. The city's portion of the vehicle registration fee will be around $330,000 annually, and that'll be starting in 2021. So as we get closer to that, that'll be conversation on road projects here in Canby and or leveraging for greater transportation pieces. I was selected by the rural cities to be the representative for the executive committee for the rural cities. So C4 is urban cities, so Milwaukee, LO, Oregon City. Rural cities are myself, Canby, Estacada, Sandy, and so I've asked to be on, or continue on the executive committee for that group, and then was also selected again to be by the executive committee to be the co-chair for C4 for another 2 years. On the Region 1 Area Commission on Transportation, that meeting we discussed the plan for the Rose Quarter improvements. So as part of House Bill 2017, the state mandated funds to address the bottlenecking at the Rose Quarter. So they have right now believe that project is going to be about $500 to $750 million to do. And there'll be a lot of auxiliary lane connections, so connecting on-ramps to off-ramps so people aren't moving back and forth in and out of traffic to hopefully reduce accidents and therefore improving congestion. And they're also looking at doing freeway covers. So there'll be sections where they'll actually build over the freeway, and that'll either be parkland or residential or commercial development that'll go on the covers. So kind of like the freeway will be going underneath those buildings. The project will take 4 to 5 years to complete for construction, and they're projecting the end date for that to be 2027 for that. And then we also laid out the work plan for the next couple of months. Our last conversation or recent conversation about the splash pad spray park. So I went and did a little tour. So I went out to take a look at Oregon City's spray park for some ideas and some inspiration. you know, yes, yes. And Mayor Holliday had sent me this, kind of the layout and specs to that, so I will get that to Rick and staff to take a look at. I also walked Maple Street Park to kind of get a better idea of, you know, since we made that decision, what that could potentially look like. And so I definitely see that that could be a good win for the community there at Maple Street Park. And I also spent some time at Community Park here around noon the other day, just because I needed to buy some water. And it is one of our busiest parks. I was surprised at lunchtime there was people fishing and hanging out by the river and whatnot. So we definitely have a couple of great assets in our parks area like that. Canby Ferry update. I had separate meetings in the last 2 weeks with both Chair Bernard and Commissioner Savas. So the county is in the midst of a survey of ferry riders right now. It started in February and it's going to run through the summer. They're asking questions like, how many times per week do you ride on the ferry? Why do you ride it? Where are you going from and to, et cetera. So they're trying to kind of get an idea of what that looks like. Based on my conversation with the two commissioners, county staff is very confident that that through some additional promotion, operational enhancements, that they may be able to close the gap down to $100,000, and that's per year, and probably starting in the year 2021 budget cycle that they think that's what the gap would close down to. So this is still all very much based on what the county can do operationally, promotionally, but again, that's $100,000 that year, but that deficit will continue to grow based on expenses and whatnot. So again, a couple of conversations that have had with the chair and Commissioner Savas was that, is that the city looking at a local improvement district? Is that something we want to pursue? There is conversation again of a bridge at a different location up the river to see if that's a better opportunity for that. I did bring up in a conversation with Mayor Knapp of Wilsonville and Council President in West Lynn about, if there is that gap, what would the three cities be interested in dividing that up? And I can't say there was, I think the chuckling by the two of them told me that it might not be a conversation starter, but they just could have had something funny that they thought of. Recruiting update. So we are in the midst of recruiting to fill the shoes of, if we can do that, our retiring city manager, Mr. Robinson. So we have homework council that's due to Amanda, our HR director, tomorrow. We're working on the formatting on the final version. They added in veterans preference points has been added to the job description and the recruitment piece. And then the question for us right now is Kim, she wants us to answer that now, or she wants that in our notes to her about the residency piece?
Well, a decision needs to be made, so she has to tell me yes or no.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, isn't that in the charter?
Well, yeah, so the question is, does the council want the residency requirement in the profile?
Yes.
And it is a charter
It's
piece
a
that
charter piece,
requires,
so it should be out in front.
so I think that should be definitely put out there front and maybe front and center so that the candidates know that piece. I think that covers my last 2 weeks, which has been plenty. So we will go to council liaison reports, and we'll start with Councilor Spoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. CTV5, we're going to meet to review strategies to make sure that there are continued improvements in broadcasting. And if you haven't gotten that email yet, there's one with a time out there, if it works for you. So look for that.
Thank you.
So that you and Gordon can kind of go over some of the problems that have happened with broadcasting and making sure that we prevent them or are resolving the correct problems, actually creating a log for what had happened in the past so that we can continue to improve. First Thursday was the first Thursday of March. It was great. The next one's going to be April 4th. So it's my understanding that we're going to continue to grow it, and then hopefully it might even become a year-long event. So I'm just helping you, remind you to put it on your calendar because it has stopped and started at various times over the years. So it's in full on. So April 4th is next first Thursday. The Canby High School dance team won their 5th straight state championship, if you didn't know, so congratulations to them. That's pretty amazing. I was thinking about how there are probably some high school students now, it's 5 years in a row, that have spent their entire high school career state champions, and that's pretty impressive. And then the Canby High School speech and debate team also had districts last weekend, and they're sending 6 students to state, which is pretty cool. And I'm going to brag for a little bit. One of them is my freshman daughter, so I'm pretty excited.
Congratulations.
District champion as a freshman, I think it's pretty cool. And then Charmed with Canby is still going on if you're downtown. So I think that's going on, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, through March, or is it through April?
It's through April.
I think it is too. So that was what I was going to say. So you can go to the Book Nook, Retro Revival, or the Canby Historical Society to pick those up, and they come with a coupon book where you can get charms at businesses all over. And that's it.
Will you email me the names of the 6 students
Yes, I will.
so that because I would like to recognize them for their achievement. So
That'd be awesome.
it's something I do
I will.
periodically through what I read in the Herald and whatnot, and so I think it's a
I know them all by first name as their coach, and I had to ask my daughter their last names, and she didn't know either. So I was like, I guess I will. I guess I will figure that out. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Great. Councilor Varwig.
Thank you very much. Library Board met last night. A couple of bullet points. They elected new officers for the July 2019 through June 2020. They continued the review of the state library standards, and they are working on the state of the library presentation that they will be doing here on the 17th of April, so that will be great. There was 135 people that signed up for the adult winter reading program, so that was great. We have lots of readers in our community, so good job. We gave away 3 Kindle Fires, so some people won some bingos, so that was great. And then fire board meets next week, but I wanted to congratulate, we have a promotion. Andrew Amott, who has been promoted to captain, will be replacing retiring Captain Bob Bonnell. So congratulations to Andrew.
Great.
And that is what I have.
Great. Thank you, sir. Council President Dale.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. For Canby Utility, there were no remarkable actions at their last meeting, except that they asked me to just take a moment to talk about outages that we had recently. If you're a resident of Canby, the last couple windstorms we had in March and February, if you were really unlucky, a branch came down on an overhead line and you had a multiple hour outage. And that's because the line had to be repaired by a crew. For most of us, we experience the flickers and the flashes and the 1 to 10 second blackouts. And that's because our utility grid here has what's called smart switches in them. And they detect when there's a short in the power line, like a branch coming down across a couple lines. And those smart switches literally cut the power in the hopes that the debris will clear itself. It'll drop off, and then they'll sense when that's gone, and they'll try to reconnect the power again. And so you can get that flickering as it tries several times. Some kinds of debris can be more persistent than others, especially the 4-footed kind in the summer. Most of our outages and flickers are sadly rodentia that use the power lines as the interurban freeway. But the utility wanted you to know that's what's going on. They've invested heavily in those switches so we can avoid longer-term outages, which are not only inconvenient for us, but also expensive as ratepayers. And so that is your Power Geek public service announcement.
I just said to her.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're very welcome. And also to let council know too, coming up, so if you have any thoughts on this, Council President Dale and I will be meeting with the new chair and the Canby Utility Director here, I think in a couple weeks after spring break, just to talk about water, power, all those pieces. So
Long-range planning.
Yeah, just start talking about some long-range planning pieces on that front. So if there's pieces that you want us to bring up, please let Tim or I know so that we can do that. And start that conversation. So, thank you, sir. Council President, or Councilor Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You already covered C4 very well. The only thing I want to add is my congratulations to the mayor for his reelection and to co-chair and reappointments to his assignments with C4. He's been doing a great job, so I'm congratulating you on those items. Traffic Safety Commission. We had a citizen come before us with some concerns on Maple Street. Some of them will be related to the project that's in appeals right now. So Jerry's looking at some pieces, and some pieces will just kind of have to wait, but that is going to be talked about at the next meeting a little further.
What are those pieces?
There's some pedestrian access
Okay.
things, and it's narrow of the road, and there was a number of things that she had brought up that they're looking at. And some of it may be off-site improvements with the project if it goes through after appeals and all that, but,
Okay.
so it's going to be a continuing conversation.
Thank you.
Then there was also a crossing concern at Fur and 13th that they're going to be talking about. These are things that were just brought up at the last meeting. I have to say the Traffic Safety Commission has done a really good job at honing in their process. Because I've been their liaison for a few years, and they can really get their meetings derailed. But now they have a process where the citizens can come in and tell their concern, and then they put it on a future agenda rather than trying to hash it out right then and there. The other concern was on North Knott between 3rd and 4th. Apparently the parking around that area is causing concern. And actually Jerry knew about this, and it's on the 5-year CIP, but they may be moving it up.
CIP.
The capital improvement plan, sorry. I'm surprised Mr. Parker didn't call me out on that. And finally, I've mentioned it before, the crosswalk that they were talking about putting in over by ACE between the Safeway complex and the Dutch Bros complex. I'm calling it that because that's where all the kids are going.
Sure.
That is actually going to be a no-go. The engineers said that they felt it would actually just create a false sense of security and wouldn't actually do the job that we wanted it to do. So it's going to have to be an enforcement issue and working with the school district as a public service announcement kind of situation. So, and finally, we did talk about the improvements on on 10th. Pine to Maple's coming next, and Locust to Maple about a year out from that. So they are working on those improvements. And so that will actually help our splash pad area. So, and that is all I have right now.
So the crosswalk piece there, so just flat out, was there any other options discussed, or it's really just down to an enforcement and
It's down to
education?
enforcement, because they would actually have to put it up further, which then they wouldn't go up there anyway. They'd have to go up pretty much by Community Park, and that, they're not going to walk that far out in the back. You won't use it, so why do it?
Well, they don't, the students don't necessarily walk up.
They don't
to
use the
light.
one that's at 99,
Yeah.
right? So they're not going to walk up further. So it's going to have to be kind of an enforcement piece and a conversation between the city and the school district.
Okay. That might be something CTV5 could be doing, another
Actually, we've talked about that.
program.
Yeah, remember
Public service
that
announcement.
the public service announcement with the texting and walking? That's kind of what we're thinking about doing again.
All right.
So,
Great.
yeah.
Thank you
So
for the update.
that concludes.
Councilor Parker?
Yeah, I guess I should apologize. I've got 5 pieces, but let me go through them quickly. I went to my first adult center meeting, which, to remind people why we talk about the adult center, is we own the building, but it's not a city program. But the board of directors wanted to let us know that they are busting at the seams. They're having to curtail some of their programs because they have more people coming in wanting to use the rooms for activities than there is capacity for that. Interestingly enough, one of those is tax preparation this year, that all of the slots have been filled for all of the days.
Wow.
So that shows you some of the interest that's going on there. Bicycle Committee is moving its meeting because its normal meeting on the last Tuesday of the month is going to be during spring break. So they're kicking it forward a week to Tuesday the 2nd. They did want to remind everyone that the free community bike rides have begun, 6 p.m. down at Bikes and More on First Avenue. And call Tony at Bikes and More if you have some more questions on that. Mayor, I attended with you the Ackerman Field project. I'll leave that up to you. Best to speak with one voice on that one. Great news, Historic Landmark Commission has brought in $16,000 in the last 2 months in grants in order to get the Master Historic Preservation Plan underway, and free money is always good. And then finally, reporting on the county fair. We're going to be trying to promote this as much as we can, and also ask CTV5 to produce a video on this. But on the 28th, a week from tomorrow, Thursday the 28th, all day out at the fairgrounds, the consultants are showing their drawings for possible realignment, moving of buildings, new buildings, and new pathways. So this is going to be a community outreach program. Starting at 9:30, going until 5, I guess. And so what I'm hoping is that video will be produced so we can upload it on YouTube, and for people who aren't able to make it there during the day, they'll be able to see it and offer feedback. But quite often, after things are all said and done, people come to us and say, why didn't you ask us what you want? Here, the County Fair Board is saying, what do you want? What do you think about? What will be the facility needs in the next 50 years? So that's a master planning project that is now moving into phase 3 with the fairgrounds. So right now it's, here's a couple of basic ideas: moving buildings, possible new multi-purpose building, and looking for some community input on that. And that is my report.
And what time on the 28th? You said all day, but I'm just...
Starting at 9:30.
9:30 to 5 o'clock, we'll say.
And the consultants will be there all day to walk people through. Storyboards will be up around the main pavilion. People can walk in, take a look, ask questions, leave comments.
Great. Perfect. Thank you, sir. Councillor Height has excused absence tonight with a work conflict, so we will move into the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the minutes of the March 6, 2019 City Council work sessions and regular meeting, and the reappointment of Donald Smeebak to the Transit Advisory Committee for a term to end on March 31st, 2022.
Second.
Motion has been made by Council President Dale and seconded by Councillor Hensley to approve the consent agenda, which includes the adoption of the minutes of the March 6, 2019 City Council work sessions and regular meeting, and the reappointment of Donald Smeebak to the Transit Advisory Committee for a term to end on March 31st, 2022. Any discussion or comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, anyone opposed? And we're at 5 tonight, so 5-0. Great. Moving into resolutions and ordinances.
Excuse me, Mayor, there's a public hearing.
You're right, I totally skipped over that. Thank you. We have a public hearing. Noise variance application for the Canby Swim Club for May 11th, 2019, from 9 until 12. Let me read our public hearing format. The matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please fill out a yellow public testimony card and give it to the city recorder. At the appropriate time, please step forward to the microphone, state your name and interest in the matter. Those people that are interested in testifying as either proponents or opponents, please indicate your desire to speak by raising your hands at this time. Anyone wanting to address the... With one, okay. Perfect. Thank you, sir. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. All questions must be directed through the mayor. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. All written testimony received both for and against shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. Staff report. Questions, if any, by the hearing body or staff. I will open the public hearing for testimony. We'll hear from the proponents, those for, so not more than 3 minutes. Opponents, those against the noise variance, not more than 3 minutes. I will then close the public hearing. Questions, if any, by the hearing body, and then discussion by the hearing body. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure of the hearing? No? Great. We will go into the staff report.
This is a noise variance for the Canby Gator Swim Club for a noise variance on May 11th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. The variance was being requested for the North Lake Physical Therapy Gator Grinder Triathlon. Canby Municipal Code requires that notices be mailed to property owners within 200 feet of the location. The applicant provided addresses for residents within 600 feet, and notices were sent out. This is an annual request, and no complaints have been received from last year's event. And Steve Pearson's the applicant, and he's here if you have questions.
Wonderful. Steve, would you like to come up to the table and,
I'll give it a quick.
in case we have any questions? Any questions on the staff report at this time at all? No? Okay. Well, then I will open up the public hearing, and Steve, would you like to tell us about the event? And
It's just a local triathlon that is a fundraiser for the kids swim club. It's driven by volunteers such as myself, and it's been going on for, I think this is 12 years.
Yeah.
So haven't had any problems in the past and don't see any in the future. So
No, it's a great event, and it's a great turnout, and we love having the event here in town. So thank you for, those are not easy to put together and orchestrate and run. So run physically those in competition and you yourself. So that's why I don't do triathlons.
That's fine.
Yeah. Well, there's a few other reasons I don't do triathlons. Hey, why is everyone laughing at that?
Sorry.
Jeez. Make one fat joke and everyone gets, just saying. No, but thank you for doing the event. We really appreciate it. So thank you. I don't think we have any opponents to the noise variance at this point. So I will close the public hearing. Any other questions by this group? Okay. Any discussion on the matter?
Yeah, I live really quite close to it, and you guys do a fantastic job. It's, for the amount of activity that happens, there's absolute minimal disruption to the neighborhoods, and I know that I appreciate that as one of your neighbors, but I think the rest of the community does as well, in addition to all the good it does for.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's been interesting that we've never had a complaint on this, and I swear I can't walk out my house in the morning without getting a complaint. So I think that this is something that must be universally beloved by our community, and I think we should pass it.
I agree. I will take a motion there off of page 3 of our packet. Someone wants to do so?
Mr. Mayor, I move to grant a noise variance to Canby Swim Club for the North Lake Physical Therapy Gator Grinder Triathlon on May 11, 2019, from 9 o'clock a.m. to 12 o'clock p.m.
Second.
Motion has been made by Councilor Varwig and seconded by Councilor Spoon to adopt or grant the nose variance to Canby Swim Club for the North Lake Physical Therapy Gator Grinder Triathlon on May 11th, 2019, from 9 o'clock until 12 o'clock. Any other discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That carries 5-0. Now we'll go into resolutions and ordinances, Kim.
The first item we have is Resolution 1310. This is adopting the downtown parking recommendations, and Jamie Stickle, our Economic Development Director, is here to present it.
Great. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Mayor.
How are you?
Hi, Council. Good evening.
Hi, Jamie.
So during the February 20th work session, I presented to you some insight and input that we received from our October 2018 Parking Task Force. That task force was created because through our department, through the city administrator, I know that Mayor received some complaints that as Canby continues to change and grow, some people have felt some of the constraints of parking downtown. So we took a look at what the issues were, and then some suggestions from a 2013 parking study that was done by Rick Williams, who's out of Portland, and he's nationally known for his parking studies. And so basically the thought is that in most of the downtown core, we would sign and create 2-hour parking in some of the outside areas, 10-hour parking, and that's for people who work downtown, who own downtown businesses, who are going to come and spend the day, which we would really like people to come and spend the day in our downtown. We also have a downtown parking lot, which is called the Civic parking lot, and that is not limited by time. And then what I'll call the train parking lot, which would be half 3-hour parking, half 10-hour parking, again, to give people a little bit longer time to be downtown. So those suggestions and a map are presented in front of you so you can see. It's very colorful, it's not to scale, but gives you an idea of where we are trying to create that 2-hour parking without having to put in parking meters or things that other cities have done. The idea is that we would create comprehensive downtown signage. So if you were to do just a quick drive right now, a lot of our signs, even if the intent is the same thing, the sign itself is very different. So create comprehensive signage that is throughout the downtown, regardless of what the hours are, to be able to do some public output, or public outreach rather, to our businesses and to our citizens and to our visitors, so that it's not just a change today, a ticket tomorrow. And then lastly, to do some random enforcement, which is a way to, I know that right now I can park downtown in a 2-hour spot in the middle of the day and not get a ticket, or at least I hope I don't. And so having some random enforcement will encourage people to use the time limits presented to them.
Okay.
So the recommendation is that council approve the recommendations from the parking task force.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie. I'm sure we've got some questions or conversation pieces or discussion with Jamie.
I'd rather hear citizens first.
I really only have one.
Okay, I think we've got, thank you, Jamie. Stay tuned. I do have, I have 3 comment cards for this. So Daniel Stearns, if you want to address us on the parking enforcement piece?
Again.
Hi, Daniel, how are you?
Good, good.
Daniel?
Just to let people know, I'm a business owner in the downtown corridor, and my business is located on the Graham Building in off Grant Street and 2nd Street. And I would like to say I'm opposed to this parking changes because there is not enough parking in available for employees. I personally don't park down there. I walk everywhere in town. And a lot of the businesses in those buildings were professionals. We're there not because we want a location for the public to have easy access to, although we like to have the public to have easy access, but most of the time we're working and it's employees that need to be down there. I talked to my employees and they said they would be a day like today would be fine to park far away from the building, but most of the days in the wintertime, it would be a very big hardship to have them walk long distances to work. I did also a quick tour of other businesses in the building. They pretty much feel the same way, at least the ones I talked to. It'd be very inconvenient to limit the parking to 2 hours. I know my particular business, I clean up after people's tax messes, and sometimes it takes them many years to get in the mess, and it takes longer than 2 hours for them to get out of the mess. And we'd be constantly having to remind our clients, okay, we got to stop now and play musical cars and go switch to a different parking spot. There is some parking in the parking lot behind the Graham Building, but that is always full. There is usually no space there unless you get there and randomly happen to get there when somebody's pulling out, basically. Since I heard about this, I went and looked around. There seems to always be parking space available on the streets. I don't see it as a problem. You might have to go a little bit, but not too far. My clients right now is busy time of the year. I'm getting lots of clients in. I've been asking them, and they haven't noticed a problem finding parking. So I guess my perspective is at least that section of downtown, that Grant 2nd and 1st, we seem to be mostly professionals, and there's an attorney's office couple attorney's offices right next to mine, insurance office, and they all kind of feel the same way. They like to be, there's not enough parking to park there, and to have them park across town be very burdensome for the employees. And I like my employees, I want them to stay there, and I want to stay there downtown, but if we grow and we can't find parking for the employees, eventually we might have to move somewhere else. That's about it.
So, Daniel, so you don't feel that there's a parking issue right now in downtown?
Currently, there's not. I suspect once the Parsons gets let out or developed, it might be. But currently, I see spaces around on the street. There is no parking usually available in that little parking lot out there. And I assume that parking lot's going to be not 2-hour parking lot, but I'm not sure. It wasn't
The
clear.
one behind Grant, you mean?
Yeah, parking lot behind the Graham building.
Yeah,
It doesn't seem
that's, I think that's private property, so that's not the city lot, so that'd be up to the building.
I think
It's not?
I thought it was public, but,
It's up to the private.
Oh, it's half and half.
Half and half.
Oh,
oh, well.
learned something new tonight, I did not know that. Okay.
So, but I didn't see that on the diagram, so I wasn't sure how that would be
Okay,
classified.
I
So,
don't know, that's a good question. Thank you, sir. Bob Cambra. Hello, sir, how are you?
My name is Bob Cambra. I live at 1338 North Maple here in Canby. I just have a question regarding this proposal, which is, and I'm sure you folks are aware of it when you look at that map, that the parking grid that you're proposing is that right around Wade Park, you're going to propose a 10-hour parking. And that kind of raises a real question in my mind. I'm not about prior council meetings, you had a lot of priorities about providing access to Wade Park as a means of drawing people downtown, or for families to access Wade Park equally. Well, if you put 10-hour parking around Wade Park, you're going to limit the amount of families and kids that are going to drive to Wade Park. That's going to be people who are walking there. I know from the grid look, it looks like it's an enforcement issue. I mean, if you give little exceptions within grids of parking, you're going to have a hard time enforcing things. But I just want to point out that striking dilemma that you have, where you have a high-use park, Wade, and you're providing 10-hour parking right around that park. So that creates a kind of a interesting dilemma for you folks.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, appreciate that. Mr. Savory, followed by Mr. Smith.
I was going to speak on 1311, the next one. One for the tax.
Item B.
Sorry. I will move you to the back of the list, sir. Thank you. Mr. Smith, and then Mr. Haynes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councilors. Like Mr. Stearns, I'm in the same building as Mr. Stearns. I'm one of the attorneys, law offices next to him. I have multiple attorneys and other staff that work for me, clients coming and going all day long, many of them carrying important papers. To have those people, my employees, and they carry their things from 3rd Street or Waite Park or Elm Street doesn't make any sense at all. I'm not sure that the proper amount of research and thought was put into this. Why would you not have any 20-minute or any 10-hour parking all the way through, 2nd Street, 1st Street, Grant, Holly? It makes much more sense to me to have mixed parking, some long-term parking, some short parking, but in all reality, the parking availability is not the problem. The problem there is that pretty much everything in that area is currently designated as 2-hour or 20-minute. And then the people will go and gripe when the employees that work in the area stay there all day long because they're parked in a 2-hour parking lot. I'm guilty. I've done it. But there's nothing, unless you drive quite far away, that's not 2-hour parking. And when you have to carry, again, like I said, we have to carry important paperwork. Sometimes I'll take whole rolling whole rolling boxes of papers to court on a day. Dan probably has tax documents that are important that you don't want them getting rained on. They want to walk from either Waite Park. We'd basically have to walk from Waite Park or the backside of Countryside Living then to get to our office. 2 blocks, to walk 2 blocks to go to your own office in Canby, because there's literally intentionally no parking spots that you can park in, doesn't make any sense. And I'd encourage you to at least rethink this or have mixed parking areas so that people can find a spot near where they want to park.
So you're suggesting more of a 2-hour mix with 20-minute mix?
And 10 hour.
Or 10 hour.
And more 10 hour in the core.
Where you have this big giant block of blue and no long-term parking, you need some long-term parking in that 5-block area.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Haynes, and then Mr. Carlson. Hello, I'm Brian Haynes, and I own Canby Music on First Avenue. And I've had it for over 10 years. And on First Avenue, there's never been any issues of people fighting over parking or not, people complaining about other employees parking in spots or anything like that. And so I don't think there needs to be any kind of enforcement, at least on First Avenue. If there's a problem someplace else downtown, then maybe you need to figure that out. But at least on my block, and as far as I know, all of First Avenue, nobody's ever had a problem with this. And so I think putting signs up and having people run around and giving tickets and stuff is not productive. And I think it might deter people from coming down there. It would make people have to park farther away. I mean, there's businesses on First Avenue that people are there all day. Or they go to multiple ones. There's the restaurants and bars that people spend more than 2 hours in the middle of the day. And somebody might go to the bike store and go on a bike ride and park their car there. And, you know, I can see if there was a problem on First Avenue that you need to do it, but nobody I've talked to has ever had an issue with it. Okay. So I guess I'm against it.
All
right, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. Mr. Carlson and then Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and staff. My name is Paul Carlson, and I own a building in downtown, the best address in town, 266 Northwest 1st. Those longtime Canby residents will know why that's the best address around. Fortunate enough to own a historical building, which is pretty amazing to be right downtown. I would agree with a lot of the comments on the parking that there currently is not a major problem with parking. I will say, however, that if I was advising a client who wanted to retire at 62 and I told them don't worry about starting to save for retirement until you're 60, that could be borderline malpractice. So planning doesn't happen the day that something happens, it happens long before that. I was fortunate enough to be on the parking task force with Jamie, so thank you, Jamie, for putting that together. I would have rather seen another meeting follow-up because I don't feel like we came to any conclusion as the group. The study that she referred to that was done, the parking study, I believe was done prior to the Dahlia building being even built. And if the goal of the city is to fill those businesses with businesses, we have to account for not only patrons to come in those businesses, but also the employees who are going to be parking there. So I would like to see, even though I will channel my inner Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec and say that less government is better government. But another parking study, I would encourage the council to look into, one with assuming that there is a decent amount of businesses that are there and employees and people parking there. Because right now, there doesn't seem to be a problem. But if all the Dahlia Building businesses are full, and if the apartments are full, and if Parsons is full, and if the 2 vacancies in the Grand Building are full, and if the other spot that's down there is full, which we all would want, I would venture to guess there will not be enough parking. So I would encourage the council to continue to look into a long-term plan. I don't know what that is. I'm not smart enough. You guys are. So I would encourage you to maybe do another study on what would it look like if all those businesses were full, which is what we really want. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Davis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Mark Davis, and I own Movu Aesthetics on 3rd Avenue. And I'm here to represent the print shop to my left and the hairdresser to my right. So we have had some parking problems. I looked at the suggestion. I don't think it's very good for us. I would really highly recommend, please don't do it. To put 10 hours in front of our businesses is not going to help us. Our problem is that employees that don't have a place to park on 1st Street or 2nd Street tend to just sort of park right in front of our doors. And we've tried to work it out with them, I think, to somewhat of a success. Try and explain, look, you know, you certainly wouldn't want us parking directly in front of your door all day long as just our token parking, our territory parking spot. So please, you know, be considerate and don't do that directly in front of our doors, because we have clients and customers that want to come, and they don't want to park down the street and have to walk with 1, 2, 3 cars right in front of our businesses. So anyway, it's I just wanted to say that I'm glad we're discussing the issue. I hope nothing gets codified, because all it's going to do is, you know, right now there's a 3-hour limit. Even though it's not being enforced, we can at least point to the sign and say, look, you're really not supposed to do this. But if it's codified that it's 10 hours, then what can we say? It's like, yeah, you know, we have no right to say anything, just park all day long in front of my business. So that would not be helpful to us. So I just wanted to make those points. I don't know if there's something, maybe there could be a designated thing, like this is for, you know, Movu Aesthetics, this is for the hairdresser studio, this is for the print shop, couple spaces just for us, maybe, I don't know. But I tend to be in agreement. I would rather not do something right now and just say, okay, rubber stamped it, without more talk about it, more thought. But I appreciate the chance to come up here and tell you about it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. All right, that is all the yellow cards that I have on this topic. Jamie?
Well, I would, as Jamie comes up, I would say I'm really encouraged, because we obviously don't have a parking problem in downtown. And I think that tonight's testimony has borne that out. I think there are a couple comments that said we could have a parking problem in the future if Canby downtown continues to grow, as we hope it does, is a very relevant comment and something that certainly bears consideration. But, you know, I'm encouraged. We have heard the opposite. We've heard complaints fairly regularly about parking, and not just in front of the Dahlia, but in other places throughout town at different times. So from my perspective, I consider this testimony to be really compelling. And if we have an opportunity to set this whole issue aside to the next city administrator who comes in, I certainly would be the last person to object to it.
Wow, that was really convenient.
That rolls off your tongue real easy.
That was good. Jamie?
Well, I would just, one comment I did have to Mr. Davis's remark that the 10-hour parking would be hurtful to their business. We heard from one of the other businesses that he spoke of, there's 3 out of 4 on that block, who encouraged a 2-hour parking. So the updated map that you have, it was my mistake that it was not the original map you received, but it does have 2-hour parking there. It just, if you choose to move forward and adopt this resolution, then that it would be 2-hour, it would not be 10-hour. We wouldn't be encouraging people to park in front of businesses like that at that time.
Okay. Jamie, currently enforcement is pretty much just complaint-driven, correct?
It is, and from what I believe that Carrie, our code enforcement officer, it's complaint-driven, which most of our code enforcement in the city is, but that it would be for an entire block. So, you couldn't call because I park in front of your business every day and she just targets my car. She would look at the entire block. So that's how I believe it works at this time.
Okay.
I have one question.
Yes, go ahead.
The signage for this plan, would it include hours? I mean, obviously, right in front of the Dahlia Building, you're not going to have 2-hour parking all night long. So is it just going to be stated on the signage that it's from the hours of, 8 to 5 that Carrie works?
8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and there is in the packet a sample, and it would state, 2-hour parking Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, so that people know exactly what their expectations are, or what we expect of them.
Thank you. Not everybody saw that. I have it in the packet, but not everybody's seen it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Any other questions?
Actually, I do have one other question. It did get brought up, so why was Waite Park, the whole perimeter around Waite Park, why was that chosen as a 10-hour area?
I think because it was not directly in front of businesses, so it was giving a place that people could park, that the business owners or employees could park and then walk in. And most of our city staff parks in our parking lot and, walks the block in, so I think that was the thought there.
Okay, but patrons to the park wasn't considered in that equation?
I'm not sure.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay. Councilor Parker?
I've got a comment, but if we're taking questions now, I'll let you finish that.
Questions at all for Jamie? No? Okay. Jamie, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Jamie.
Comments, Councilor?
Well, I never thought I'd live long enough to hear Paul Carlson say that we need more meetings and we need more study. So I am grateful I lived to be this old. And Mr. Davis reminded me of my time in the city of Medford 30 years ago when they were having growing pains in their historic downtown, which was geographically constrained. And what the city of Medford decided to do, and maybe this is something we might want to consider, given the vitality we have managed to generate with our business, is that the city of Medford passed a resolution creating a parking district and turned the management over to downtown businesses. And so they managed it themselves. And we had 7 people testify, and not one was in support of this. So given the testimony on the table, I would look for your guidance on a way for us to, I don't know if tabling it's the right motion, but it doesn't seem to be a compelling reason to move ahead this evening.
Okay. Appreciate that, sir. Yes.
This is one of those rare moments where Councilor Parker and I would agree. Resolution.
I have lived a long time.
Resolution 1310 is on the agenda, so I don't know if we are supposed to address this in a vote then, or if we just table it. I do think that maybe the parking study needs a little further study, and maybe some adjustments made to the plan before we vote on it. So I'm not sure what the appropriate time to do that is, if we table it now or if we address it under resolutions and ordinances.
Well, we're still in public hearing, is that right?
Right, we are.
Have you closed the public hearing yet?
Well, the resolution is not for, but no action is an appropriate action.
Okay.
Yeah.
So-
Well, let me, is that,
Then I move to table
Can I
it.
just add a couple
you
of
making a
comments, maybe
motion?
I move we table it
Yeah.
and have further study.
Second.
In October.
However much study it
wow, it
takes.
is like Comedy Central around here tonight. So, motion's been made by Councilor Hensley to table this for further
For further
investigative
study and
study and
adjustments.
conversation and adjustments. Did I hear you second this,
Yes,
Councilor
sir.
Sloan? Any other conversation or discussion on that issue?
I just
Yes.
want to, a couple of points. I really like, since we're going to talk about it in
Sure.
the future, a couple of things that I really like are the idea of mixed hours. I know that if I park downtown every day. I've never had to walk more than a block in the last year, even though I'm headed near Gwynn's. But if I was coming downtown to go to a salon and have lunch, I'd need more than 2 hours, right? But wouldn't necessarily need 10, and I think we can have more mixed times. But the other thought is that one thing I really would hate to see is us have rules and posted signs and not enforce them. I think we should either pick something that works and enforce it, or decide that it's not time to enforce downtown parking and not time to have signs down there. I don't like creating the culture or the idea that our rules are ambiguous or they don't have to be followed. If we're going to set a rule, I think that we should be open to enforcing it. So either make some decisions about mixing up the times or getting rid of the times at all until we feel like they need to be enforced. But my preference would be for a greater mix of times. Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that staff has kind of maybe some marching orders to move forward. We want maybe a better mix of time zones downtown, maybe look at Wade Park and take into consideration if that really needs to be 10-hour right around the park or not. And that we do need to plan for the potential problem, but that maybe we're not quite there yet, but having a plan in place is necessary to do so. Am I capturing comments and what we heard this evening?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a long-term deal too. I think, I mean, like everybody's mentioned, I agree that we don't have a parking issue because everybody knows how everybody's in agreement. This is really weird. But I agree, I don't think there's a parking issue. I go downtown quite often. I spend a lot of time at Gwynn's. It's my second office. It used to be my primary office, but I let them pay the rent for me now. So I go there a lot, and I've never had to walk more than a block, and I don't like walking very far. And I don't think there's a parking issue. So I don't know if it's something that we really need to address before October, or even October of 2 years from now. But it's good to have it kind of on our radar, like Paul Carlson said, but I don't think it's an issue right now. So,
Jamie, does that help you? I mean, just kind of with tweaks and maybe keep the task force, on speed dial and pull them together and just kind of monitor that? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
We will, so all those in favor of tabling it for a later date?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We'll take it off for tonight and go back and do some more homework. Great, thank you.
The next item you have is Resolution 1311. This is granting an exemption from property taxes under Oregon revised statutes for a 69-unit housing development owned and operated by Canby Dahlia LLC, an Oregon limited liability company.
I think I need to provide a little bit of background here. I think there may be a little bit of misunderstanding. In November of 2014, the City Council affirmatively took an action to establish the vertical housing tax credit as a tool for business attraction. And that was brought to you. You considered it, you'd adopted it, and we've incorporated it since that day in efforts to attract mixed-use developments into our downtown core. We have one mixed-use development that is more than a single story in Canby right now, and so this is the first development that meets the criteria established for this vertical housing tax credit. The discretionary action that you took in November 2014 established the program. All you are really doing tonight is reviewing the documentation to assure that it is in fact complete, which my representation to you is that it is complete, and the steps have been taken that are required under the terms of the vertical housing tax credit program to determine that, in fact, the project is eligible, and then the percentage deduction, which is based on the number of stories of a building that the particular development is eligible for is accurately reflected and represented both in the resolution and in the certification as well. So that's really the action that is before you tonight, not to decide whether or not to approve or deny the tax credit, because you made that decision in 2014 when you established the program. It's just whether or not all the conditions precedent to that approval have in fact been met, and it is your staff's strong belief that in fact each of those conditions have been met.
Okay, that clears that. Thank you, sir. Questions? I do have one yellow card on this with questions of staff right now on this piece.
I would add,
I read that it was a 10-year exemption, is that right?
it is a 10-year
Okay.
exemption. I would add one additional point to this. If this body, which is not the same body that approved this in 2014, determines that this is a program that you no longer support, that's an action that you could take at a subsequent meeting if you want, in fact, to rescind your previous action and eliminate this vertical housing tax credit as a program incentive to bring mixed-use developments to downtown Canby. But that's not really the question that's before you tonight.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions right now? No? I do have one yellow card for this one for comment, and that is Mr. Savory. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Apparently, I'm 5 years and many millions of dollars in tax money too late to object to this. The fairness and equity of this tax exemption eludes me like a gazelle eludes an arthritic cat. And so I'm not so sure that, I've never been in favor of shifting the cost and the burden for a project such as the Dahlia to the citizens of Canby, and because it takes away from fire, police, and other things that we need money for. These, obviously, the people that built the Dahlia and will can afford it. I mean, they have the money, and it just doesn't seem equitable to me that the people of lesser means and other businesses don't get these types of exemptions if they want to expand their business. So that's all I have to say on the matter. So get your arthritic cats in order and maybe revisit this.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, John.
I would, for the benefit of the council, and not relating to Mr. Savory's comments, but remind you that at every step in the development of this particular project, when we discuss the financial implications, the vertical housing tax credit was brought to the public's attention in each of the discussions, including in the financial analyses, and in determining what the return on investment would be, what the time it would take to make this project profitable to the residents by building the project versus leaving the old buildings where they were and collecting taxes of $1 million or based on $1 million of real property versus $15 million of real property. Those are all the discussions that we had leading up to the final determination that this project is an appropriate project to support. And I think that that's relevant too. It's not something that we snuck in under some sneaky mechanism. That just was never the intent. We were always above board on this.
Rick, the impact of this, I guess the tax piece here, is it across all the taxing districts, just the city? Do we know?
Well, it's within the urban renewal district, so it only affects URD taxes. And the other taxes, which are pre-URD, were set at pre-URD levels, would be the same once the properties go in the tax roll. And in fact, because of the increased taxable value associated with this project, once the Urban Renewal Agency sunsets, when the debt is paid off, the return on investment to all of the taxing jurisdictions, including the city of Canby and Canby Fire, and our fire chief and I had several conversations about this as we were looking at the project, what the short and long-term implications were. But the impact is to the Urban Renewal District principally.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do not want to be here, and I do not want to keep coming up here, but I'm here, so I might as well.
Third time up. Your chair's empty. You want to come?
Mr. Robinson did address what I was actually going to come up here and ask about, which was the concerns that a lot of people, including myself, had when we were essentially giving that property to the Dahlia Project in exchange for the promise that there would be a significant advantage to the tax revenue. And then when, the public, or even myself in the back of the room hearing, we're going to give them a new tax credit, I was going to ask how this affects the return on investment. I believe it was a 15-year plan to pay back the $10 million or whatever in value we'd given to them, and those sorts of things. And so I think Rick said that those were dealt with in the projections that we saw. But I do want to bring up and just, I guess, bring back to the attention that with the vacancies in the Dahlia building, now the parking fee thing that Mayor Holliday talked about, the lack of businesses going there, if this tax exemption, I'd hope that you'll keep a close eye on this project, because we could take it back. That's the ultimate downside is that this is now a city building again. And if they don't do all the things they promised us they were going to do, that was the result. So hopefully it was in the projections, and there was it stays on schedule, and ultimately we are paid back. So thank you for answering that.
Yeah. I might mention too, just for the history of it, this was something that was brought to the council's attention, and you guys voted on it prior to, I think, even the expressions of interest. Renata Mengelberg and John Southgate brought this as a way of enticing when we were actually asking for the expressions of interest. So it actually came before we even knew who we were dealing with, let alone the building itself. And then it was baked into every conversation.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Any other questions or comments for staff on this, or clarifications? So again, Rick, as a reminder, it's not a matter of continuing the program or not. It's just, is this, the paperwork that's here tonight meet the criteria that we need to approve to grant what's already in place, and if we want to tackle this, the tax credit piece later on.
That would be a separate action.
Okay. So, we clear on that aspect of it? Okay. Someone wants to move us forward with a motion or not?
I'll make a motion, but first I'll say that I am completely open to having the conversation in the future. I mean, I wasn't on council when this decision was made, but if it's something that needs to be revisited, I'm open to that. In the meantime, I don't feel like we have much of a choice. So I move to adopt Resolution 1311, a resolution granting an exemption from property taxes under Oregon revised statutes for a 69-unit housing development owned and operated by Canby Dahlia LLC, an Oregon limited liability company.
I'll second that. Motion's been made by Councilor Spoon, seconded by Councilor Parker to approve Resolution 1311, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Canby, Oregon, granting an exemption from property taxes under Oregon revised statutes for a 69-unit housing development owned and operated by Canby Dahlia LLC, an Oregon limited liability company. Any further discussion?
No, I would just concur that we should probably reopen the discussion at a later date.
I have it noted. Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Passes 5-0.
And Rick, do you want me to move that on the agenda after October as well?
It may be better to move that sooner rather than later, so I'll work with Jamie and we'll bring it back for your conversation. In case we have other businesses that are interested in it, we don't want to create false expectations.
No, fair enough. Thank you, sir.
But, yeah, simple answer, I wish that we could, but
No, it's,
He's trying to make our November really busy.
or his last meeting in October to be really busy. Yeah, no, because to Joe's point on this as well, that was an economic development tool that we looked at and discussed as we were looking at what we wanted to try to do in terms of visions and aspirations for downtown was, is there a tool like that needed for housing, kind of that if we build it, will they come, or do we wait for someone's own volition to make that move? So if we do have developers interested in downtown, we should probably, to your point, address that sooner than later. So thank you, sir. We'll move into the second one, or last
The
one.
next item you have is Ordinance 1504. This is before you for second reading. This is authorizing a contract with Eagle Welsner Incorporated in the amount of $522,949.50 for North Maple Street improvements and declaring an emergency.
So yeah, we discussed this at our last meeting, but Rick, will you give kind of an update again on what's...
yes, this will be a reconstruction of Maple Street from northeast 10th to northeast 14th Avenue. It's actually an area just immediately in front of Maple Street Park. I will, in case people are wondering, let you know that this has been a project that's been in the works for about 18 months, so it's not directly resultant from the splash pad locating there. This is a project we've been working on for some time. The project will be to reconstruct the road surface, add sidewalks, curbs, and gutters.
Great. Thank you, sir. Any other questions on this topic?
Mr. Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance number 1504, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a contract with Eagle Welsner Incorporated in the amount of $522,949.50 for North Maple Street improvements and declaring an emergency. And it's already been declared why the E-clause is there, so I won't ask.
Thank you, Counselor. Is there a second, or?
Second.
Oh, I missed that. Sorry, sir. Motion's been made by Counselor Hensley and seconded by Counselor Varwig to approve ordinance number 1504, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a contract with Eagle Welsner Incorporated for the amount of $522,949.50 for North Maple Street improvements and declaring an emergency. Roll call vote.
Councilor Parker?
Aye.
Councilor Hensley?
Aye.
Councilor Dale?
Aye.
Councilor Varwig?
Aye.
Councilor Spoon?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
And the last ordinance you have is Ordinance 1505. This is amending Canby Municipal Code, Chapter 3.35, Park Maintenance Program, Sections 3.35050B and 3.35090E, Annual Adjustment.
Yes, as I'm sure you recall, the establishment of the park maintenance fee also included a component in which the city's contribution was increased by a cost of living adjustment on an annual basis. The cost of living adjustment that was adopted was a consumer price index for the Portland, Oregon metropolitan service area, which seemed safe because it's been in place forever and has been used very broadly throughout the Pacific Northwest in establishing inflationary trends. Effective this year, the CPI for Portland, Oregon metropolitan service area was abolished, which leaves us with a circumstance under which our ordinance says we're to use one particular index, and that particular index does not exist anymore. What I have before you tonight is a recommendation that you adopt the CPI Pacific Region CPI-U and Consumer Price Index for urban communities. And the two choices, the two most likely options that we saw were the CPI West region and the CPI Pacific region. The CPI Pacific region includes Alaska, California, Hawaii, Oregon, and Washington, while the CPI West region includes all of those states along with certain mountain states, including Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. In reviewing the particular index percentage changes for these two indices, and I have provided that to you in your packet. You know, for the year ending 2018, December 2018, the number is actually the same at 3.1%. But I felt it was in the best interest of the city and would represent a fair and most equitable application of a CPI and provide, I think, in my opinion, the most honest annual adjustment to the city's contribution to our parks system if you were to adopt the Pacific Region CPI. So my recommendation to you is that you approve Ordinance 1505, which would adopt the Consumer Price Index CPI-U for the Pacific Region cities.
And so, Rick, this is a budgetary.
Yeah, this is
aspect.
something that we need to do because we need to incorporate that, the annual increase into the 2019-20 budget that you will be seeing. There aren't a lot of other options that are available to you that I thought would be fair and representative of what this region would be facing in terms of inflationary pressures. You know, we could have cheated and tried to go to a lower one, and I just felt that was not an ethical approach. And so what I tried to do was find the index that was the most appropriate for the specific geographic region that we represent in Canby.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 1505, an ordinance amending the Canby Municipal Code, Chapter 3.35, Park Maintenance Program, Sections 3.35.050, Parent B, and 3.35090, Parent E, Annual Adjustment.
Okay, thank you. Second.
And I apologize for stumbling over all of these things. After reading all of these indices for several days, they just kind of blend together.
It's okay. Just hold together for 160 days.
You got it.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hensley and seconded by Council President Dale to approve Ordinance 1505, amending Canby Municipal Code, Chapter 3.35, Park Maintenance Program, Sections 3.35.050, Parent B, and 3.35.090, Parent E, Annual Adjustment. Any further discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? That carries 5-0. All right, next on the agenda is the update on the Ackerman Field Feasibility Study. And Rick is pulling that up for the PowerPoint. Let's see if I can figure out my mess up here, be able to discuss. Bless you. All right, so for those in the viewing audience that may or may not know, and reminders for the council, so the school district in the city has been kind of working on very early stages of conversation regarding the development of a recreation complex behind Ackerman Junior High. And so tonight, just giving everyone an update on we've got initial drawings, the field feasibility drawings that come back, and so it's just initially it's a feedback conversation from the council
on the drawings, and to send that back to the design team, so just showing everyone kind of where we're at. So the next slide, this is the area that's in conversation, so that includes this, should I have a laser pointer?
Yeah, I do. You do?
It's loaded,
It's
thank
loaded.
you.
Don't shoot your eye out.
You put your eye out in there.
I don't have to figure out how to use it.
Usually just press a button.
All right, so this area here to the right, that is the extension of Legacy Park. And so we're looking at what could be done with this whole entire area from an athletic and recreational standpoint in terms of improvements and whatnot. You want to go to the next slide there, Rick? So this was design A that came back. So as you can see, Legacy Park stays all intact, and we add in some different field options and development in the back area here. So the dark green area, would be area that is turfed, not natural grass. The lighter green would be the natural grass areas. The red is a track or a trail that would go around the complex. And then the yellow stars are individual, either like learning kiosks or exercise stations that people can use. The objective was looking at the complex, was trying to figure out how do we create an area that can be used from 8 months old to 108 if we have it. So looking at fencing, separating the area from Lee Elementary, which is still being used, same with Ackerman in its current state. Basketball courts, tennis and pickleball, an additional restroom, and picnic shelter. So that was the first drawing. As you can see, all the different lines, the idea is to be able to address baseball, softball, football, lacrosse, I'm going to leave it out. Soccer on the complex. So that's why you look at trying to meet some of that all-weather, all-season use on the turf area. Rick, you want to go to the next one there for me? So design B, right? Yeah, option B, just again another layout of what could be done. We have, so the blue, those are just access ways around to be able to access the field. Parking is added here on the south end of the complex for just again to be able to hold additional capacity on the park grounds. Move to C there, Rick. This is option C. So turfed areas. You have area for softball and baseball could be used here. The current field would be kind of left intact. One of the challenges with this one was soccer overlapping on the dirt infields of the baseball. It was not a highlight for some of the soccer. The nice piece on some of these the larger fields is to be able to do, if we did a tournament, depending on the age range, you could do as many as 32 teams at one time playing on all surfaces if need be, and that could just be at one time during the 32 teams, one game, one time. So kind of picturing that aspect throughout. And then the last one there, Rick. So this is option D, again, addressing baseball, softball, and then turf for all the other sports, and then grass. This one, some of the feedback we gave the designers was the tennis courts being kind of way over here and maybe away from some of the parking, the adult center and whatnot on this end. And the thought being trying to keep these areas together. The other piece that came up in conversation was what does the what about maintenance sheds and stuff for the ground? So that was a piece that we asked them to go back and do. So what you'll see on the next slide is this is the hybrid of A, so the revised option. So what that did was it created 2 turfed areas. So you have softball, baseball, and other sports over here. Again, to keep in mind the idea being that it's a joint effort between the school district and the city. So what portion, if the high school sports teams had to come over and be able to, for a rain out or whatnot, because they don't have turf, what would that look like to be able to meet the needs for both softball and baseball? We added a maintenance shed piece, and then, the courts are all kind of there, and we like the idea of having the soccer field down on this end. Just felt that being closer to the parking would give a lot more play advantages to people and whatnot. The ball fields here can be used both for longer-term play during the day and into the evening, and could even do adult softball at. And so lighting for this area would prevent light bleed over into the neighborhoods and whatnot, and try to detract or prevent some of that, those pieces there. That was hybrid A, and then hybrid B, which is the next one. So this is what came back on that B slide. So these are just, the challenge with this center section is because of if this was the seventh and 8th graders or high school players using this field, you would lose the ability to use those 2 fields because of the fence line. So that was one of the reasons that this one really didn't get a lot of traction in conversation. Again, the school district was not real jazzed about having the maintenance yard right there next to the school. So we're coming back and proposing something maybe more in this area. And so based on feedback, so last night, we have a task force that's been put together that's been meeting on this. And they provided some initial feedback on Monday night. Tuesday night, the Park Advisory Board, which was last night, provided feedback, and they really, by the sounds of it, liked the hybrid A. Rick, if you want to go to the next slide. So this was the feedback that's kind of come back on A, was taking the maintenance yard and seeing if we can move it here and swap these 2 pieces, so to make this area turf, and then to make this field, baseball field, smaller, and then eventually possibly that becoming a turf option as well. So that's kind of what things are at now, and this is, the task force really liked A, and so what I'm looking for from the council is just, I think renderings went out end of last week, and if you've had a time to take a look at it, I know Councilor Parker is on the task force and saw it on Monday night. So I guess I'm just looking for initial design thoughts, or again, keeping in mind, this one, moving the concession stand in the middle, pathways, the around area, the track around it would be either, looking at a couple of different things, it could be asphalt, it could be a all-weather track material. There's like a gravel composite that some parks are using that allow strollers, wheelchairs, ADA access around the trails. Councilor Parker, am I leaving anything off?
No, I think in terms of the design, you had it represented accurately. I have a bunch of questions, but they're way down the road. There are a number of ways to approach any project, and the first question is always, what is going to be the first question? And so the task force has decided the first question should be answering what, and then the how will come later. So it was clear to me around the table that there were experts on design of athletic fields and overlapping seasons and participants from the different leagues there that had a pretty intimate idea of their schedules and other people's schedules. So pretty strong consensus that with this piece of property, this offers as much flexibility and also meets Title IX requirements of equal access. So this is outside of my wheelhouse. I think if I'm able to add any value, it's a little bit further down the road with some of the operational questions. But right now, this is just lines on a paper on what could happen there.
Yeah, and that's again, it's very early conversation piece. It was, and so again, we're just throwing ideas, getting some ideas out there on what could potentially occur there. The bigger questions I'll show on the next slide here in a second. But to Councilor Parker's point, the task force is made up of, I think we have every sport represented. We have a really good cross group of age and members of the community. And that was one of the pieces with this aspect was because you have lacrosse on a turf area and you have baseball on a turf area, and they both in the same season, and so that was something that could potentially paint a conflict. That's why the question came up, well, is there a spot maybe down the road that this becomes a turf area, because and you can run soccer and lacrosse, at least closely run a game or practices on the turf there. Any thoughts on taking back to the designers, or?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions about the design, just because does that say, because I can't read it from here, tennis and pickleball courts
Yes,
the same? Okay, because I know that some of them had separate pickleball courts, but that hasn't combined. Okay.
So yeah, it's tennis and pickleball, so they'll go in and it'll be lined for both aspects.
Okay, I wrote a couple of questions down. It looks like in front of Lee, they're talking about putting 90 more spaces in. Would that be, are they talking about paving that or just using that as parking?
That's a great question. So that part, when they were looking at the parking numbers on what could be maximized for parking, Rick, I don't know if that's on the first day one, was that the one?
There was one where it was blue, but I didn't know what that meant.
It's way earlier. Yeah, if you could go back to the first A slide. Yeah, so this one, yeah, so what the consultants were looking at is if we were to maximize parking and they didn't include, they backed out these numbers here, because of the pool and the adult center.
Sure.
They threw that as an option if there was a tournament going on and an additional parking was needed, could that be brought in as a temporary parking area, not something permanently to be paved? Yeah.
Okay, because one of the things I love about our schools here, I have a kid at Lee, and I know Counselor Varwick has a couple too, is how green they are, and the idea of paving in front of there and then taking up so much in the back kind of made me sad. Well, the students on events like field day and whatnot, they use a lot more of the space. Would they have access to it for special events and stuff?
Yeah, so that's part of the next piece we'll talk about is the intergovernmental agreement between the school district and the city in terms of what does that look like. And so yeah, field day, that was where when you saw the drawings, they initially had fencing, I think, that kind of went in here.
Yeah.
But we went back and we wanted them to run fencing all along here.
Yeah,
So that
I
way,
like that better.
this still is, and the playground is still accessible during the
And there's
school
open
day.
space for them,
Yeah.
which is really important, I think.
And then to be able to put, if need be, a gate or something in here, so that if they want the expanded space of, because I do know that sometimes they will go over and play on the baseball field as well.
I just have a couple of other logistical questions. In terms of the track, just if we're giving feedback, I would love to see an all-weather track. I'm sure that, I'll trust the experts on that gravel works for strollers and wheelchairs, but I'm thinking about our aging population and their joints, if they want to walk or jog or continue that level of more high impact activity. And if whatever the substance is works for that, as long as that's in consideration, I think that's important.
Okay.
And then, was there any talk with the tennis community about, I've seen a number of them talk about wanting covered courts, and I'm sure that's a huge added expense, but was there any conversation about covering because there's no all-season place to practice?
There was not
Okay.
conversation on that, but that,
I don't know if it's an option, I was just curious. I don't play tennis, but there are plenty of people who
it's
do.
worth
yeah.
asking the question.
And then my last question, again, because I don't know, it's been a while since my kids were in sports. If we go back to like the hybrid A that we're talking about, thank you, Rick. If there's an injury or a health emergency somewhere in the middle, how does emergency access work to get to them?
So that question came up at the task force meeting,
Okay.
and so right now there's a emergency, there's a driveway here from an access point, and so that was one of the questions to take back to the consultants to make sure that one, the pathways were wide enough to be able to get an ambulance if need be into the center or the far field. What would that look like, you know? So that is a conversation and a question to take that we are taking back, and I don't know, Chief, I think that came up last night in the Parks meeting, so.
Okay.
And I'm sure Barry's got maybe some feedback for me to pass on, so, yeah. great
Yeah,
question.
no, I think it's great. It's an exciting prospect. I have a lot more questions about how, but as long as we're just on why, I think it's great.
Well, and again, this piece here, that is not an out of the question conversation. You know, the school district is having a lot of conversation now about what is the future of Ackerman, and Superintendent Goodall did mention, you know, at the chamber luncheon that, well, what could that be? Could that end up someday being a community center, and what would that look like? So all of a sudden, this all kind of becomes a bigger piece for the community, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about the prospect of a community center, but I think that the idea of having it all in one place is pretty exciting if there's a how that works for everyone.
Totally.
I think the what's pretty cool.
So, did you have something?
I do. Obviously, my concern, as I'm sure a lot of people's, is their children. My children do attend Lee Elementary School, and so I'm looking at the path walking around and looking at the separation between a public path and a child's playground being a chain link fence. And so I'm curious, I assume most people are good, but what does that look like during the daytime when kids are playing on the playground with people wandering the path?
Sure.
So what's kind of security do we have that people won't be passing things through a fence or, you know, talking to the kids or whatnot? You know, Those are the security concerns that I have with it.
No, and they're legitimate, absolutely concerns.
And I'll say, let me also say that I really like this plan better than any of the other ones because I love that green space is still open because I know my kids love running in that grass back there. And so when that path was through it earlier, I kind of was like, I don't like that grass going away. But if that's staying, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it was interesting because the original configuration with the track, you can see it just slightly underneath here. There's been a couple of times at meetings here talking about the project and looking and going through it with the consultants that, you know, there is currently no fencing, but yet there was still, on one of my visits, there was 3 people walking the track.
Sure.
Now, that's considerable distance necessarily, but it's still an open space kind of a deal. So in terms of it being this close, that is that is a concern, and I don't know if that means, you know, we gotta loop the track maybe more in here. You know, I don't know. That is something that we can look at.
Yeah, that would be my only concern about it. And like you said, I mean, there's nothing there right now, but although this I believe would attract more people than just the circular track does at this point. So, you know, I can see us having a lot more people during the day here. So just as long as it's kind of on the forefront of people's minds, you know, the security between the kids playing on the playground during the day and there. Other than that, I really think it's a great plan.
Okay, great.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
and I thought, we kind of talked about it briefly, but just for other people who weren't when you and I were talking, is the turf going to be fenced so people, I mean, we want to minimize damage to the turf because the expense cost in terms of people taking dogs out there and playing fetch, like that would be the least ideal place for them to do it. Or is there going to be a mechanism to kind of protect the turf to minimize ongoing replacement costs?
Yes, so
Okay.
on all the turf fields, part of what factors into the cost is a 4-foot-high fence that prevents, well, should hopefully prevent dog traffic from, going on there and taking care of business and being dogs, yeah.
And being dogs.
Rick, if you go to the next slide there. So the next steps for the recreation complex are these. So right now, so we're just doing an initial field feasibility roadshow. So like I said, Monday was the task force, Tuesday was Park and Rec, Wednesday tonight is us here at City Council, and then tomorrow night the school board is going to take a look at just the exact same thing. My job is to deliver feedback to the consultants from the roadshow by the end of this week. This week also begins the process for the intergovernmental agreement conversation. So what are the pieces that we as a city need to make this work, from just a logistics, maintenance, control of, et cetera. So staff is beginning that conversation. April 3rd, the City Council will discuss the preliminary thoughts and ideas coming from the IGA from staff. So that'll be on the night of the 3rd. Week of April 8th, the goal is to have our first initial conversation with the school district on the IGA. So that's kind of the initial timelines on that. Rick, you want to go to the next slide? April 11th, there'll be a draft field feasibility brought back. So the technical design team, which is school board members and city staff, and I think a couple of parks people, will see that initial draft look. So condensed down again for another round of feedback. So then it'll again go on another road show. So Thursday night, the 11th, the task force will see it. Then Tuesday through Thursday will be park board, city council, and then the school district for that other draft. And then tentative items and tentative dates. So we still have decisions by council and the school board on a path forward, which we're hoping for May or June to have at least that conversation decided on. Intergovernmental agreement updates to council. That'll be as that starts to develop. Cost analysis will be based on, what that final draft will look like. As an example, we had some initial conversation on turf costs. So if you remember, field design A, not the hybrid, not the one that's everyone's kind of looking at. We're looking at $12 per square foot for turf. So just on that one turfed area, which was the kind of the home plate looking, Rick, I don't know if you can go back a couple slides. So just this area here to turf that was $1.8 million as an example. So that's all, that's excavated turf, striping, the fencing, and whatnot on that piece. So that gives you a little idea on terms of what turfing fields could cost. If you go back to the last slide there, Rick. Thanks. So that's where the cost analysis piece comes in. Final draft, when we get there, the goal is in May. Community meeting for the feasibility, for the field feasibility. So once we have what we think is the final draft, we definitely want to have a community meeting to have everyone see that. Beginning ending May for the final one. IGA, hopefully, if we move forward and the decisions and everyone's on board, IGA finalized and signed at the end of August, and then the objective is to hold our first soccer tournament in the fall of 2020. So it's aggressive in terms of trying to get it accomplished. The majority of the heavy lifting truly is going to be the IGA and figuring out those pieces for the school district and the city to work together on trying to make this happen. Where, cost is a big piece, and then where does that where does that money come from? Do we do it, do we not do it? So, again, very early conversation pieces on where we're at. Just wanted to give everyone a look at what's been talked about so far. This will be before October. So, well, and that's, that's the piece, right? I mean, we get into the nuts and bolts of it, and we start talking about the IGA, and, we're hoping that the school district and school board and city council can iron those pieces out. That's the goal. We have to have that in place, because again, this is one of those things where if it's school property, those feel that green space behind there is school property, and if we're going to be involved in any way, or from a maintenance standpoint, from a dollar standpoint, we need to line all those pieces out before we even move forward on spending any more money on it.
Just in relation to the other projects we have going on, so are we assuming that, is the splash pad going to be on hold until we figure out what this, or we're still moving? Okay.
No, we're still
Someone
moving
asked
forward
me that,
on-
and I was
yeah.
like, I don't know.
No, the RFP for the splash pad is being reviewed now by staff, and we'll be
Okay.
sending it out probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks, I think is our timeline.
Yeah, it'll be out in about 10 days.
Oh,
Okay.
sure that, so, yeah.
So everything else is still moving forward?
Yeah, so
Okay.
splash pad is still moving forward, yeah. This is in addition to that development piece, so. Any other thoughts on where this is at, or? So, like Councilor Parker said, a lot of our bandwidth is coming up here at the beginning of April when we start talking about it, so, again, if you've got questions, I'll answer them as best we can going as we get closer, or even that evening, so. All right. Yeah, thanks you guys. Moving to city administrator business and staff reports, anything, Mr. Robinson?
Just real quickly, and you already touched on it on the splash pad, we do have a draft RFP that we are getting ready to circulate. We should have it, comments back within about 10 days. This is a project that I'm anticipating I will be the project manager on, so we're planning to have it in the ground and operational by the end of September at the latest, hopefully earlier September, but kind of the drop dead date is around the end of September, so it'll be ready in the spring.
Okay.
Brian, can I ask one more question? Is it possible to get this slideshow up? It wasn't part of the council packet, so that the public can look at it more closely, because I imagine they'll have a hard time seeing it from just the video. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
If we could include this in the,
I'll post it below the packet.
great,
That'd be
thank you.
awesome.
Yeah, it was really my fault. I didn't get it ready till about 30 minutes before the meeting.
You're fine. But I think they'll like to see it up close.
I don't think you're totally on that one. I think that was a joint effort. Yeah. All right. Joe, do you have anything? Since you're part of the...
I do not. Thank you for asking.
Great. Second opportunity for citizen input. I have a few cards here, so I'll go through them. If you still want to speak, please, you're welcome to. If not, just say pass. Adrienne Carlson. You want to speak? Yep. Floor is yours.
Hello, Mayor Hudson and members of the council. I appreciate this opportunity and to your service to Canby. My name is Adrienne Carlson, and I live at 22543 South Central Point Road. As a member of this community, I want to share with you my view on the matter of the Transgender Day so we accurately represent the people of Canby. I believe this idea would not be a wise decision for this community. To celebrate transgender people specifically is not only a form of discrimination against heterosexuals, but gives special privileges to those who think they are something they are not. I was born in 2002. This makes me 16 years old since my birth. But if I identify as a 21-year-old, would the city encourage me to be myself and get a drink? I'm Caucasian, but if I feel I'm really Asian and was born at the wrong place as the wrong person, would the city have any right to applaud me in my decision to apply for my employer's minority program? You may say that's ridiculous. She's obviously 16 and Caucasian. But tell me, what's the difference? Where does it end? Canby as a city has no right to create a day specifically tailored to encourage the act of pretending to be something you biologically are not. Thank you for your time, and thank you for accurately representing the people of this community.
Thank you. Catherine Christensen. Pass. Terry Coleman. Did you want pass? Doug Coleman. Okay. Janet Bailey.
Pass.
Suzanne Gallagher.
I'm going to pass too.
Okay. David English.
My name is David English. Thanks for your time. In regards to this Transgenderism Day, can I ask a question and then follow up?
Sure.
Is this an actual proclamation that the city has decided to move forward with? Or is this just merely a suggestion that's in the ether?
So it was a request of me to do a proclamation on, and I made the decision not to do the proclamation. And so the request was to have that for this meeting. And so I declined that proclamation request. And so that's why it was not read today.
Well, perfect. I thank you for representing our city and declining that offer. I too, regardless of my moral beliefs and what I believe, I don't think the city needs to, number one, do frivolous proclamations. And also, our community, we're a caring, compassionate community. We do care about others. And we don't need to go out of our way to, as a city, to do these things. If we want to bring in authors and things and special visits and a private citizen wants to do that, I'm all for that. And I think as a private citizen, you should get out there and support who you want to support. But as a city council, I don't see any reason for us to take a stance on such a divisive issue that is a political issue. It's also a medical issue, and frankly, I just don't think it's a political quagmire we need to get involved in. And I'm just going to put my personal thing aside. I just don't think the city needs to specifically endorse that activity and that thought process. But as a people, we do and can be care about others. And that community, it's sad that they have that issue. And it's tragic that the suicide rate and all those things of that group is that way. But as a city, I don't feel like, as a political body, that needs to be endorsed. So I thank you for your time, and I thank you for your leadership in that matter, Mayor Hodson. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie Carlson.
Good evening, Mayor Brian Hodson, city councilors, and city staff. My name is Stephanie Carlson, and my address is 22543 South Central Point Road. My husband and I also own a business here in town and a building here in town, 266 Northwest 1st Avenue. As a former city councilor's wife, I understand to a degree the positions you guys are in. You want to make this city better. I get that. But you were each voted in by citizens of Canby, and you represent we, the people. You must put your own agenda and opinions aside and represent the people who elected you. I thank you for remembering that tonight. I am here tonight in deep opposition to Councilor Spoon's proposed Proclamation Day for transgender people. I am in complete and wholehearted support of Mayor Brian Hodson, who has turned down this proposed proclamation. Yes. Mayor, thank you for representing your constituents well. Singling out a particular group in favor of them is simply discriminatory. In essence, you would be saying you favor one group over another, and this is not the job of the City Council. If you were to proclaim a special day for transgender people, then in order to be fair to the rest of your citizens, you would need to declare a special day for transsexuals, bisexuals, heterosexuals, and virgins. The list goes on. The Constitution states that all men are created equal. we should represent and celebrate all people without preference. Thank you.
Kenneth Barrett? Olivia Barrett? That's all that I have on those cards. Well, I appreciate the input on the matter, or I guess that request, so just leave it at that for right now. Kim, action review.
You've approved the consent agenda. Resolution 1310 was tabled for a future date. You've adopted Resolution 1311, adopted Ordinance 1504, and approved Ordinance 1505 to come up for second reading on April 3rd.
All right, thank you.
Quick reminder, Budget Committee meeting tomorrow, 6 o'clock in here, and the public is invited.
Great, thank you. Joe, do we have an exec session this evening?
We do not.
All right. I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Good night, Cammy. Thank you.